Today's topic is translation central issues. What is translation? That is the first question. Your thought process may be in one language, expression may be in another language. Even if it is same language, that can also be called translation, right? From idea to text. Idea to text is also translation. So now tell me, what is translation? Transference of meaning, not only confined to that, even the thought process. So that's why one very famous person, Octavio Paz, so he was a Nobel laureate, you all know, Mexican poet. He talks about that all texts are original, but what is translation? Translation is translation of translation. Next question. When you know, what are the different types of translation? Okay, before types, let us talk about this also. Now we know, especially translation practice in a country like India, right? What is the speciality of India? Multilingual. One layer we have seen that within the language also, idea to the text is one layer. But what happens in our day-to-day life? So we always, translate something or the other. So it need not be a text, right? So if you want to tell someone, or speak something in Hindi, right? So you have to think in your mother tongue, then translate and then speak. There are two layers of translation that actually happening. So for us, for Indians, where we are in multilingual setup, so translation is a very, very, very common thing for us. You need not have any formal training for that, right? And as a practice, we know that since our olden days, you take about the Sanskrit literature, ancient literature, all your Puranas, then all Itihasas, all these are now they are available, right? We know that every language and literature, they have all the ancient literature available in the form of translated literature. So though we don't give them as call them as translations. For example, in Telugu, Mahabharata is there, right? So is it written in Telugu? Was it written in Telugu? What is that? It is transcreation. So Nannaya calls it as transcreation, but somewhere the process of translation happened. But for a Telugu reader, or when you read the history of Telugu literature, so we see it as part of the original writing of Telugu literature. That is the status, right? So when in polysystem theories also, so when there is a dearth of literature, when the literature is very young, the translations play a key role in developing that particular literature. So that's one thing. And we have some texts which are also translated into different Indian languages in India. So we practically, our translation as practice, there is no doubt we are very good. But what happens to the discipline part? Why are we so slow in that? And that too, when we talk about translation as discipline, always we talk about only the Western theories. Okay. So, and every time we want to give some kind of equivalence in English. For example, in translation what happens is a source text may have a particular thing which is related to that particular culture. If that culture is not there in the target language, target culture, why are we so keen that we are trying to find some equivalence? I will give you one example which is there inside also. So we all know about this. So January 22nd, what happened in Ayodhya? Pran Pratishtha, right? So this is a Sanskrit word and we all know the meaning and all that. And the next day, if you look at or read the newspapers, almost all English newspapers used one particular word. What is that word? Consecration. What is that? Consecration. Now tell me, do you mean to say that Prana Pratishtha and consecration are the same?
It is something like a ritual.
It's a ritual because two different cultures, two different religions. One is Hindu religion, the other is Christianity. So where it may be a similar thing, but it is not equivalent. So in that case, my simple question is, if you want to translate consecration into Indian language is one thing, and when you are translating or when you want to give equivalence for Prana Pratishtha in English, why are we so fascinated about using some English word? Why can't we use our own word? Because Prana Pratishtha, it is culturally rooted word, right? And it is our responsibility to make your target reader to know about this culture, to know about this particular word, this particular phrase. But why are we not doing it? We all should think actually. Because every time we always think of giving some equivalence. there is no doubt we have to find equivalence, we have to work on equivalence, but when there is no equivalence available and when you can't give equivalence and when these two are not same, right? Maybe in Telugu Balakrishna dialogue both are not same, something, you know, there is some dialogue, right? So these both are not same, right? So but why are we giving this? So that is a question we have to think. So because we are very much fascinated, we are very much, you know, always the influence of the maybe Western culture or Western language. English of course is required, but at least certain things like this, if we can provide them, at least English would have got one more new word, right? So we are, that way we are not contributing to English also. We are trying to give somewhere, you know, the equivalence and, you know, get rid of the work. So why are we not trying to make our culture popular by using certain words, and also you can, you know, enrich English vocabulary by adding, you know, these such kind of words. So now, so knowing about this, so as a discipline we are little, you know, lagging. All of us should think, and when there is a possibility we should think of. Now that, you know, government of India is also planning to introduce certain courses on translation, especially capacity building programs. So now that there is a proposal for creating some 10 lakhs translators in next 5-10 years. So that is the target. So what will they do? You may ask, sir, the general translators themselves are not getting the jobs. Even if they are getting some work, it is only the per word you will get 50 paise or 1 rupee, something like that. It's not lucrative, of course. But now that there is a need for a lot of real-time translators. So real-time translators will be working, may not work in the departments, but they may work for the departments. There are 92 or 93 departments in government of India across some 50 ministries or so. So every day something or the other, some kind of communication is happening. And if you observe, every time there is some office note, it is written in English and then translated into either Hindi or Telugu. It's happening in our states also. So they prepare it in English and then they translate into Telugu. But why can't they do it the other way around? You can write in Telugu or you can write in Hindi and then translate into English, because the second language or English is only for the larger, you know, people, right? So or those who want to read, but the base is the primary user. So the primary user, the primary language is important. So that's what we have to think. So now that there is a proposal, more than doing MA translation studies or BA translation studies or PhD in translation studies may not create translators actually. Because even in translation studies we only teach the theories. Again we talk about Eugene Naida, Roman Jacobson, this and that, right? But how practically, how skilled they are. So for that what is required? Skill training is required. Because now that NEP talks about mother tongue, education in mother tongues. So now that MBBS is offered in Hindi medium, but do you have textbooks or reference books in Hindi medium? No? And in Anantapur, JNTU in Anantapur in the Andhra Pradesh, they offered BTech in Telugu medium. But do they have engineering textbooks available or reference books available in Telugu? No. For that, some organizations like AICTE, so they have one tool called Anuvadini. So through Anuvadini, that is a machine translation. So they are translating these reference books into different Indian languages. And accuracy level of course is not that good, maybe around 60-70%, but then post editing, human intervention will make it a better work. So that is one thing. And of course NTM, they are also doing knowledge text translation. Okay, so we will come to that. So before we move about that, so let me also talk about what are the different types of translation, because now we know very clear about what is translation, what is the status of translation as a practice and as a discipline. So some of you may ask me, right, sir, do you think translation as a discipline? Because many people think that translation studies is a sub-discipline. Okay, so people from comparative literature, maybe Asit is here from our university, so they may think that translation studies is part of comparative literature. Many linguists are here, I think, so they think that it is the applied area of, applied area of linguistics is translation studies. But we from translation studies, though with literature background, we say that it is not sub-discipline, it is not discipline, it is interdisciplinary subject now, because now we can find its relevance in science, text translation, engineering text translation and all that, right? So that's why it is no more a sub-discipline, it is an interdisciplinary thing. Now, so what are the different types? Yes. Yes. Okay. So again, going back to the primary, the linguistic model of types. So this person, Roman Jacobson, so is a Russian formal linguist. So in one of the essays on linguistic aspects of translation, so in 1959, so he talks about 3 different types of translation. So this is based on, his idea is, so intralingual means within the language. So you can call it as rewording, and we know about Shakespeare's works reading as paraphrases. Okay, so no one dare to read the original. Of course you can read, but because of the medieval English and the understanding the words and all, we always focus on the right side. So in a text you will have left side and right side. The right side is the paraphrased. Paraphrase is nothing but a kind of rewording, right? So kind of summary or yeah. So this is intralingual translation. So where it happens within the language. For example, if you want to read, let's say that Nanaya's Mahabharata of 16th, the 11th, 12th century. So now we may not be able to understand that classical text. So we have again some kind of intralingual translations happening where the easier versions are available, right? Yeah. Next is interlingual translation, where as someone said, it is from one language to other language. Okay. In intralingual translation, it can be the same text or it can be other text also, right? Source text can be same and target text can be same in case of rewording, and it can be other also. So what happens there is, one text paraphrase is within the same text with paraphrase, and the other text will be other language will be the same, other version of it. So then translation proper is interlingual translation. So you are using proper 2 different languages, 2 different texts. What is this third one? Third one is intersemiotic translation. So in the first 2 something, what is happening is the semiotics, right? Sign system. So right, if you say R, you have a symbol for that. So but in intersemiotics, what is happening is the form of the text is changed. You have a novel here and you are making it into a graphic novel or a movie. So we know very famous, as a routine example that I give, Harry Potter, right? Okay, Harry Potter as a text, Harry Potter as a movie. So what is happening? Do you find the same thing there? Huh? Medium is changed. Contents, will they be same? Definitely no. We can't say that actually, right? So because when you are adapting it for film, there may be some changes. For example, as a text, the requirements are different. But on screen, what do you expect? If there is a movie, you want some songs, some comedy scenes, some fights and all that, right? So same kind of another set of things will be added when it is moved to the screen. So that's why, so this is known as transmutation or intersemiotic translation. So these are the 3 basic proper types that he talks about. Okay, so now based on the text type. So text type, for example, we have poetry, prose and all. So what do you call them? Literary translation. The other ones, whichever is not literary. So what are the genres of literature? How many genres are there? Poetry. Okay, short story, right? 4. So these 4 come under literary translation part. And when you say literature, a lot of aesthetics part is there. So when you say a poem, right, you have some rhyming order and you have some set of rules. If it is a sonnet, you have how many lines? 14 lines, first 8 and then next 6. You have a different form, right? So and when you are translating a sonnet into, let's say, that other language, into some Indian language, so do you maintain that sonnet form? Will it be possible with the same rhyme order? They have ABBA something, right? So it is very difficult, right? So literary translation, the problem is the aesthetic part, because what gets lost in translation is poetry. Okay, so that's the definition by whom? Robert Frost says poetry is what gets lost in translation. So do you agree with that? No. Yes. Okay. No means when I say yes. Okay. So now the other part is non-literary translation. So whichever is not literary, so you have for example knowledge text, so which is done by NTM, and of course for literary translation, Sahitya Academy, they have been getting the award-winning works. They get translated into 22 recognized languages. Okay, every year it happens. Then of course NBT is also doing some literary and some non-literary translations also. So they are making some textbooks or some books available in different Indian languages, and of course technical terms are also there. So this scientific terms, for example, you have photosynthesis. Okay, do you have photosynthesis? Okay, how do you translate into your languages? Can you translate that? Yes. Do you really call it as translation? Yes? Okay. Train. The word train. How do you translate? Rail Gadi. Telugu? Duma Chakatam. Railu. Okay. When you say Duma Chakatam, will the kids understand? Photosynthesis in Telugu is known as Kiranajanya Samyoga Kriya. So people may think that it is better to learn English than this. So we should never create that. This is actually not translation. They are actually coined. Okay. So that is known as evolution. Coinage or evolution, which we do not do generally. So there is one organization called CSTT, Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology. So it is under Ministry of Education. So they have a full setup. So when they want to again get the words coined in different languages, I was talking about MBBS books in Hindi or engineering books in Telugu or Indian languages. For that, first they need to have the terminology or the jargon. What do you call it? Jargon should be available, or you have glossary of literary terms, right? M.H. Abrams. So likewise, you should have glossary of some public administration, something like that. So if you have glossary, then translation of the text become easy. So CSTT has been doing for the past 50 years or so. So but now that the availability of it is a problem. No one knows that there is an organization called as CSTT at all. Then what about their, the terminology availability? For example, agriculture related words, right? So they should be translated and they should be made available to whom? If it is related to agriculture, who should be the target reader? The focus should be on the farmer, not on the agriculture, BSc agriculture, MSc students. No, because when a farmer is able to understand that, then that is successful. Otherwise it will be like Kiranajanya Samyoga Kriya itself. So photosynthesis, you have a big word, and that's why we are very smart here. Whenever for our convenience, so if it is train, bus, we say basu in Telugu. Okay, maybe in Kannada also it is basu. Any Kannada speaker? Basu itself. So how conveniently we could, you can say that nativize or use bus as basu. But why can't we do Prana Pratishtha as it is in English? What are we doing? No. See, in agriculture field, there are two things, three things are very important. One is teaching, research and extension. So extension activity is the main thing for agriculture related literature. So CSTT, they don't confine to only agriculture, all scientific terminology they do it. But usually when they get these words coined in, let's say, Telugu or Kannada language, so again the purpose is to extension. Extension means that should reach the lab to land. That is the focus. So it should reach the land. So here, so the technical terms part is one aspect. So when you say based on the text type, you have literary translation and you also have non-literary translation. Now these days another new context or text is hybrid text. Okay, we always talk about hybridity in a text. So which hybridity? It may be linguistic hybridity or it may be cultural hybridity. So what if the text is hybrid? What if the text is, okay. Okay, yeah. This is, alright, okay. So now, yeah, where are we? Hybrid text. So based on the text type, literary, non-literary, and it can be hybrid text also. Because these days it's very fashionable that we write Telugu literature but still you have many English words. If you say, if someone asks, no, this is the trend. Of course it is the trend. We should welcome that trend. And there is one poem in English by Meena Kandasamy. So that's known as Maligatani Dreams, right? Maybe Tamil speakers here. How do you pronounce that? Maligatani or Maligatani? Actually it is Milagatanne, right? So Milaga is pepper and Tanni is water. So it's a dish actually. So it's a soup kind of thing, I think, right? So rasam, yeah, actually it is rasam. So for that they have this Malagatanne. She has written one beautiful poem on that. You might have read, people from English literature. So Meena Kandasamy, you can type it in Google also, where she says that the colonizers' influence, the influence of English, right, on Indians, how it is there. She wants to write, she wants to use English, but she wants English, the English which accommodates her culture. Okay, so that's why she uses that word Maligatani. She would have said some other word also, right? some soup or something, but she never said that. So Maligata in the dreams means here you are opposing the colonizer by using their own language. So here in the process of that you are supposed to, or you are happen to use some local words, and it is happening the other way around also. When you write in Telugu or when you write in Hindi, so you can use some English words. For example, Amitav Ghosh. Have you observed Amitav Ghosh's writings? So you can find especially kinship terms which are mostly Bangla. Bengal. If I say Bengali, I think maybe the person, I think Bangla is right word, I think. Maybe the right, okay. So he uses Tama. He could have used it as grandmother, but he says Tama. Tama is like grandmother. So in Telugu we say Nanamma. Okay, so like that. And he uses Mesha Moshoy or Jeta Moshoy or Kaku. So these are the words. So it is actually English text, English novel, where the kinship terms you can find them in in Bangla. So that is a kind of hybrid text. You all know about Salman Rushdie's works and all that. So based on the text type, so your strategy should also change. So basically when you look at translation types, one is the intralingual, interlingual, that is proper linguistic model of types, and this is based on the text type. Okay. So now that you all know about this is a very simple test for all of us. So let's try. All of you get ready. Translate into any of the languages you want. Okay. If you do more than one language, that's fine. Okay. Yes. Try. Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes time. Yeah, you attempt. See, translation theories you will get anywhere, but translation practice, that's what I have been telling, right? Practice is very important. So we don't want any theories. So this is the issues that I want to focus on. Yeah. Anyone finished? Yes? Okay, let me focus on the Telugu speakers. Okay. So they are working jointly, I think. Co-translators. Okay. Done? Yeah, please read. No, because this is a stanza in a poem. Okay. Any idea about this poem? No idea? Yeah, please. Yeah. No, I asked you to translate. Whether it is literal, word for word, sense to sense is up to you. Because though, again, a very old routine Italian saying, traditor, traditor, right? So traditor is translator, traitor. So whether you do it very well or not, you will get that award. Okay, as traitor, you are branded as traitor. So whether you are faithful or not, also you will get that. So translators' hands are fettered, right? Because the freedom that the original person, the poet has, so the translator will never have. Because you always want to be faithful to the source. So in that process, it may get lost. So according to Robert Frost, some people they say that poetry cannot be translated. Now you translate and tell me, or you attempt to translate and tell me whether it can be translated or not. If so, if you have translated, you please tell me. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Vasant, okay. No, you said you are doing literal translation and you want that someone said spring is Vasant or Basant, whatever. In Telugu it is Vasantam, okay. Let's see. Yes, madam, yeah. Okay, Samanya Karanji. Okay, common spring. Okay, Karanji means kind of. Acha, okay. Right. So, yeah, next. Yes. Okay, what did you do with that common spring? You omitted it. How many of you have done this omission of that word? No, in omission, in translation, omission and commission are two important things, right? So commission is fine. What is omission? How many of you omitted that word? Because if you look at spring as spring, then you might have omitted it. But think like a poet. Because spring there is not actual spring, of course. Yeah. See, this is a poem, a stanza from Edgar Allan Poe's poem named Alone. Alone, the title itself shows that. What is alone? So it means that person, he does not mingle with others. So now you think from that lens. Of course, in the beginning also you might have done it. So he is not able to see in the sense the perception, right? How you perceive the world is different from others. So everywhere he has that division. So that is the entire crux of it. Now it is left to you how you want to bring that sense to your target language. Because ultimately, what is your focus? Why do you translate? Are you sure you will translate for the target reader, target language? Then your focus should be yes. So if you feel that it is readable to your target reader and there is some relevance to that person, target reader, target language and target culture, then even if it is free translation, that is appreciated. Otherwise, you will be branded as traditor, right? Okay. So of course we are affected, there is no doubt, because what the poet thinks we may not know. But what is important is the context of the particular work, because most of the times if a sentence is just given as a sentence without context, right, forget about the sentence, just let us take some word, I'll give you one, not word, it is word, okay, instead of word I am giving the word. What is this word? Word without child, word is child, word can also be hospital ward can also be, you have ward members, ward councillors, right? So one word, it has three different contexts. Without knowing the context, if you are translating, same is the case with the word subject. Okay, subject to something and subject, we are all subjects of the nation, and English subject, math subject, so you have different contexts, right? So what is important is for a translator, when you are attempting to translate, we should understand the context of the text. But in the beginning days, most of the theories which are from the linguistics or linguistic theories, okay, like Jacobson and others, so the focus was on mostly on the equivalence part, especially the word level. But other linguists also said, people like Sapir said, each language has its own reality, right? So Prana Pratishtha, it has its own reality here, and if you make it as consecration, that reality is missing. And if you say consecration, the English reader may understand it in a different sense. So when you are failing as a translator, right, then you are suitable to get that award, first thing, right? And when you want to be successful, because what did you say? Our target is target reader. So then why do you want to mislead your target reader? That's my question. Okay, so now that many of you might have translated, now tell me, what are the kinds of challenges that you faced while translating? Yes.
So maybe the word that does not exist in the target language.
Okay, that does not exist. What did you do there? Spring, it is there in your language. And then, okay, so existence of that word. So if it does not exist, right? Symbolism, right? Next. Connotation. No, because while talking about literary translation, I was taking that poetry has some aesthetics, right? So do you find that aesthetics in your translated poem? Maybe they have some, it has some, rhyming order is also there, I think, right? Here, there and all that. Could you follow that? Or do you have that meter? Right? Yes, sir. Yeah.
That will become a challenge for the reader.
If you follow that. Yeah, that's what.
Reader must have the same mistake.
So you are keeping your target reader in mind, and then you are facing the trouble and making it convenient and easy for the target. He is a very good, he does not require that award. We will give you a good translator award. So that's what is required, right? No, it's important because when we translate, we face so many such problems, very simple things. Okay, sometimes we may not find such words, right? For example, we know certain concepts. We know about villa, right? Have you heard? Okay. Okay, what is Telugu equivalent for villa? Because in Hyderabad every day we see villa, 3 crore villa, 4 crore villa, all these villas are there, right? Maybe in Hindi? Huh? Kutir. Koti. Acha. And what if it is mansion, castle, manor, bungalow, house, home? See, in English we have some 5-6 words which describe the same concept, but the target language may not have. This is known as hyponym, I think. Maybe linguists can tell me. So where you have only one equivalent. So where in Telugu we have only one illu, I think, right? So when we say rondo illu, so it gives a negative connotation, right? What is that? Second wife. Okay, yeah, that's what. So because I also wanted to talk about fidelity of translation, so I'll talk about it little later. So when you don't have the concept, don't create that concept, right? So illu for house, if you are writing illu, and for villa if you write rondo illu, so that means that so you are misleading and you are giving a negative thing. So that's why we should be, of course, translators are double-edged swords, no doubt, right? So you should be very careful in using it. It means using the translation skill. So I know you are all very skilled. So of course, that's what, true. And of course, it affects the culture also. So once that concept is changed, cultural nuances will also be disturbed. Okay, so there are certain challenges that you faced. Any other challenges? Translation itself is a challenge, sir, you say? So because poetry cannot be translated, I think, right? Can be or cannot be? Mm-hmm. Why don't you think translation as creative writing?
Can it be seen as a form of creativity?
Of course. Let us come to that. Okay. Right. So now that you have translated, so now tell me, you faced some challenges. Now, do you consider translation as art or craft or science, or it's just a secondary activity? According to him, so why don't you call translation as creative activity? He said, can we call it? So it means he has some doubt. Okay, so now, is it just secondary activity? Because in post-colonial literature, there are binaries, right? You have a colonizer, you have colonized, you have a ruler and rules. Original and translation. So what is the position of translation? It is relegated to a secondary position. So is it so? No? Okay, because when you say translation as secondary activity, you are contradicting that every language has its own different reality, right? So when you translate a text to a particular language and culture, definitely it has its own place there. So you need not actually compare it with the original. So then once you compare, automatically the secondary thing comes. Now tell me, forget about the secondary thing. Now tell me whether it is art, craft or science. Art? Oh, then you must be all artists. Huh? Science? Okay, so then you are all scientists. Now tell me something. You are calling yourselves as translators, but not artists, or is it a craft? It's a mix of art, diplomatic answer. Okay. So so it depends on the context. Okay, let us see. So there are some people who talked about it as art, as craft and all science, and some people call it as secondary activity also. Of course, again a linguistic theory. So that Eugene Nida, you know about him, right? So toward a science of translating, he has written a book in 1964 where he talks about translating, the activity of translation as science. So means that activity is treated as a scientific activity. So when you say science, automatically you have a source language, then you have analysis, you have transfer, you have then restructuring and then receptor. So that's it, he said. That's fine. But if you just replace the words, right? What is required is, so you have one source language and you have one target. So you are analyzing and you are just restructuring. You are replacing the words there. Do you call it as a at least good translation or readable translation? No? Why? Yes. Yes. See, in some cases what happens is, if the languages are parallel structures, let's say that Dravidian languages or other languages where you have Telugu, Kannada, some similar structure is there. Sometimes replacement of that is known as literal translation, especially at grammatical level. But even then, the word may not give exact meaning or the sense. If there is no sense, why do you translate? So that's how, though he called it as a scientific activity, but there are certain problems with that scientific activity thing also. Now, why do you call it as secondary? Because you may say that this rule is there, that rule is there, Jacobson is there, and you have Catford's rules are there, Peter Newmark said something. All these things are there. But if you look at them, so they are only the guidelines, not the rules. If you go with okay, now that I gave you one thing, I told you that Eugene Niner told it as a scientific activity. I also gave you a poem. Now using his technique, replace the words, decode and recode. Do you get that meaning which you translated in the beginning? This is the activity for you in the evening. You can try this. Apply Nider's model on this particular stanza. You think whether you can really get it and call it as a scientific activity, especially poetry translation, whether the science will work or not. So more than science, it is a skill. So how do you get that skill? By reading theories? By practicing. So to become a good translator, so you should keep doing translations. So even after doing so much, you may feel that you yourself may not be happy with your translation. So that is always there. People like Sujit Mukherjee told, there is no perfect translation. So there is no end to translation also. There is no full stop. There is only a comma. So if you translate today, after 1 week if you are translating the same text, so you may change it. So it happened in my case, like so many times I keep changing till they force me to submit one last day. So I will be doing that. No, it happened yesterday itself, because they gave me a book almost 2 years ago from Sahitya Academy. They have been asking. I said, no, this week I will submit. So finally he called me yesterday, sir, before 30th you please submit. So now that whatever that commas are there, now I will put a full stop. So that's the end to it. So unless you have that compulsion, you are free to change, right? So now that this is all cyclic process. You have an author, you have a text, that is you have a reader or receiver. Then that receiver is the translator. Again the text, and it's a process that it goes on, right? So that's why. So most of the times it is the skill. Now if you follow again, go back to that coding and decoding kind of thing without context. Context is very, very important, right? So you can observe, you have an equivalent. This is by Susan Bassett. She talks about this. So where you have butter and burro in Italian language. So of course the word is there, but the cultural connotation is different. So we should, as translators, we must be very, very careful about the context, especially the cultural connotation of that. For example of this butter and burro, and let us take our own example. I was talking about prana pratisth, right? So prana pratisth, if you have given it as consecration, so that, and of course karma. Karma. What is that equivalent? Fate. Okay. Work, maybe action, deeds. But actually karma in Indian context, karma comes back. So it is the consequence of the so effect of, so but when you translate it as action, when you translate it as deed, are you getting that connotation? Definitely you are missing it, right? So that's how we should be very, very careful. So as translators, taking that, understanding the cultural context and making it available in a true sense. Now if we say because of his karma it happened, so if there is a sentence in Telugu, if you are translating into English, So the karma actually there is different from what karma is in the translated text. So we should be careful. So then as I was talking about Sapir, so each language has a different or separate reality. So we should focus, understand that. But ultimately you talk about this theory, that theory and all that. So ultimately on field it is important. Sitting in front of TV, Sachin should have hit some 6, this 100, this, and saying is very easy. But you should be on field, right? So once you play cricket, then you will understand the pain, right? So that's why, so practically the pragmatics is very, very important, right? Pragmatics, that too, you can't take a lot of risk. You can't take lot of risk. There is one theory called as minimax theory. Am I out of time, sir, or no? Okay, so minimax theory, where you have to get maximum effect with minimum effort. Effort should be minimum, right? Effort should be minimum, effect should be maximum. So this is the minimax theory that we should follow. So that's why we should be very, very careful, and same time omitting. I was talking about that omission of translation. It is a very, very common thing. That is also known as loss in translation. We will talk about loss and gain in translation after a little while. So now, so this is another text. Can you recognize that text? Piece of this text? I am giving you a clue. Indian novel. Another clue. Trio of Indian novel. One of the trio. Who are those trio? Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan and Mulk Rajanand. Okay, this is from R.K. Narayan. This is from Raja Rao's Kantapura. So you know how deeply culturally rooted text it is, right? So you might have studied it or read it sometime. So here shaven head is there. Actually you should translate this one, but since paucity of time, I am not giving you, but you can take it as an assignment. Maybe tomorrow also my session is there. I may ask tomorrow. Okay, so shaven head has a cultural, right, specificity, right? If it is translated or written as shaven head, what happens if an English reader is reading it, right? So that is the thing. So that's very, very important when you are translating culture. They are known as CSR, culture specific references. Okay, this is for the example sake I have shown. You can try and you can tell me the challenges. Okay, now so everywhere we talk about all the linguistics theories talk about equivalence, because prana pratishtha and then you have consecration, whether they are equivalent or not. When I translate something, should I look for equivalence or not? Should we look for equivalence or not? Yes or no? Say loudly. Okay, now the next question is, if you are looking at equivalence, at what level? Should you look at word level? Sense to sense? Or is it at syntax level? Because when you say literal translation, when you say word for word translation, and when you say sense for sense translation, and when you say adaptation, so how are you doing all these things? So there are different methods and approaches that are available, and of course especially in case of idioms and some figurative language and all, maybe you can see this example, right? Literal translation, does it make any sense? No. Elephant's teeth are different for eating and showing. What is that? Hathi ke dant khane ke aur dikhane ke aur. So if this is the sentence given or kind of idiom it is there, if you are translating into English, if you say elephant's teeth and all that, just imagine. So maybe you can have translation by function. So where it is not equivalent but equivalent, right? It is not equivalent because you may not have exact equivalent idiom in that particular source, the target language and target culture. So in that case, you have to take the meaning or its function, so that at least you can make it readable to your target reader and target culture. So this is what is important. Then maybe some other you can try. It's raining cats and dogs. Telugu guys, tell me. కుక్కలు పిల్లలు వరుసలు వస్తున్నాయా? మేబీ కన్నడ ಹೇಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ ಮೇಡಮ್? ಓಕೆ, ಜೋರ್ ಮಳೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಹಿಂದಿ? ಇಟ್ಸ್ ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಡಾಗ್ಸ್. Okay. Where are the cats, dogs gone? So you are giving equivalence. Okay. And this one also. She saw him duck his head. You know the duck what it does, right? So that's I gave that explanation also. See, if you are translating into any Indian language, just try. So because you may not find equivalence, right? As he said, which you feel equivalent, we may give kicking the bucket, right? We don't know how it came into English thing, right? Maybe that person might have kicked the bucket, then he fell, then head injury, and after that maybe died. But when you say kick the bucket, it is just it is dying. But the etymology or the story behind it, we don't know. Right? But you can't write all that story. No, first he kicked the bucket, then he fell down in bathroom, then his head injury happened, then he was taken to hospital and he was in ICU for some time, right? On ventilator for some more time, then finally he is no more. So all that cannot happen, right? So we should be very smart in, if not translating, finding equivalence. I am not telling you to translate these things, at least replacing them with some equivalence. Okay, so now that is the story. Again, Eugene Eiler talks about two types of equivalence. One is formal equivalence and the other is dynamic equivalence. So formal equivalence is you are so faithful to the source text, source language, source culture, source form, source style, all these things you are so faithful. So that is known as fidelity in translation, right? So in other case you are not faithful, so you are not fidel to the source. So this is the thing. So what we did in that elephant thing is that in elephant thing, if it is literal translation, so you are so faithful, that is formal equivalence. In the second case it is dynamic equivalence. But ultimately what is our important? Who will see whether it is formal or dynamic? When your reader is reading something, there should not be any speed breakers, right? So he has to read it in a flow. So the flow of the reading should not be disturbed. So that should be the aim of the translator. Okay. Now again same thing. Another example for that. So in formal you will follow the original, preserve the structure, literal meaning of the original. In dynamic you will go for the sense for sense. Okay. Now most of the times very discussed that omission part I was talking about is loss. Of course, why do you think it as loss? Because initial theories they all talk about loss itself. I was talking about Frost. So he also says what is lost in translation is poetry. But why do you have that negative perception? So think positively. There are certain things you can gain also. So sometimes if the concept is not clear in the source, as a translator you can make it available and make it clear to your target reader, target text. So that is possible. So these days translation gain is also gaining some importance. So we should, because when each language has a different reality, so the question of loss will never arise. Do you agree? When you look from the sense or the angle or the lens of source text, then everything is a problem for you. Then translator will look as a traitor. So you will never understand the feelings and the problems of translator. But if you forget about that source text, source part, you are very free, and what you look is the translator and the translated text and how the text is reflecting. So whether it is readable and whether it is close to the culture or not. So these should be the important things. Okay, now when you focus more on loss, you will always see it as a secondary activity. That's what I was telling, right? So when you look from the source angle, when you look from the loss angle, it is definitely a secondary activity. But now we are not in that age. This is in 1950s, 60s. So this was the situation. Now we are in 21st century, 2024. Now we have so much, that is, we treat translation as original. How it is, we will see. Okay. So now this faithfulness and fidelity. Should you be faithful to the source? Yes or no? So then what is the point in translating? Because I gave you the text, he said literal translation, and spring is not translated, right? And if you are so faithful to the source text, what will you do with your target reader? You are not translating it for the source author. You are not doing it for the source text or source language. Your focus is ultimately. So should you be faithful? Yes. So the meaning, the language part, because when you say translation, it is not just confined to the language. So there is something beyond language also, that is extra linguistic features. So the sentence structure part, yes, you are free. but there are sometimes, as I told, the concept is known, but you don't have the equivalence for that particular word in the target language. So in that case, what do? Do you think that I am not faithful, so let me do something else, or do you omit that? Omission is also a problem, right? So somehow you have to take it to the target reader as much as possible without disturbing the source, the theme of the source, and without doing injustice to the, because if you are not a good translator, you are doing injustice to the target. I will tell you certain examples regarding this fidelity and faithfulness part. So let us come to some other part, translatability, right? So I gave you a text or a stanza. So were you able to translate it? Now another question is, poetry is translatable or not? Tell me. It is. But Roman Jakobson says poetry can only be transposed. It cannot be translated, he says. But after certain years, again Octavia Paz, in one of the essays, Translation, Literature and Letters, he says that poetry is definitely translatable, but what is the condition? The translator should also be a poet, or if you are a poet should also be a translator. So in these two circumstances, poetry can be easily translated. So now that, so had you thought of as a poet, you would have translated that particular stanza as a poet, right? So or if you yourselves are poets, definitely if you are a translator, you will do justice to that. So that's why in these two cases, he talks about possibility or the translatability. But in all cases, translatability is possible or not is left to you. So now you think of that, because you also have a concept called untranslatability. For example, I was giving that word villa, right? And if you take that pranapratisth as it is, that itself is not translatable. It is untranslatable, right? So and you have, according to Catford, he talks about linguistic and cultural untranslatability. So in some cases, linguistic untranslatability can be overcome with some equivalent. So that's what we were planning, right? So we were talking about that. But cultural things, for example, pranapratisth is a culturally rooted one, right? For example, we have punya. Okay, in Telugu we say punyam. What is in English? In Kannada it's punya, right? We have pap. In English we have equivalent. What is that? Sin. Okay, so are they the same? Sin and pap? Okay, to some extent let's say that equivalent. Then what is the equivalent for punya in English?
Beatitude, there is the one.
Huh?
Beatitude.
Beatitude?
Yeah.
But culturally, will they?
Almost, the connotation wise both are same.
Same. Okay. So that's how. So pranapratisth is a new concept that even many of us we don't know, right? So we might have heard about it, but the importance of it is because it is in limelight for last maybe a couple of months or so. So that's how. So linguistic and cultural part, especially sindoor is there, for example. How do you translate sindoor? Vermilion. Okay. Is that color? Exactly. What happens to the connotation? In Telugu we have, for example, let's say sare. Sare, concept of sare is there. When a bride after marriage, it is sent along with her. So some sweets and all that they send. So what is equivalent for that? Can we? No, right? We have, for example, karra billa in Telugu, gilli danda. Okay, so if you are translating it into English, what is the equivalent for gilli danda? Sometimes we don't know, right? So that's why there are some words not available. For example, savory is there. Savory, we know that concept of savory. What is the equivalent in our languages for savory? Meeta? Namkeen, okay. Katta meeta da? We know that that is savory and that feeling of the taste. But when it comes to the word, Telugu, any? Savory. Just think like that. Okay. So now, sometimes words are not available. Sometimes words are available, but untranslatable. We know that democracy, all languages have equivalent. Yes? Hindi. Ganatantra. Ganatantra is republic, I think. No? Loktantra. Loktantra.
Politics and Rajniti is another problem.
Yeah, exactly. That is another thing. So the word democracy, of course, it has equivalent. But if you look at these three phrases, bold phrases, American Democratic Party, then German Democratic Republic, then Democratic wing of Conservative Party. So look at the context. The same word democracy. But if you look at the context and where they represent in these three are entirely different. And if you are translating them into our languages, so what should be our option? Just think. Okay. Got my point? Yes. Yeah. No. The terminology is also part of translation. So wherever there is, because when you say untranslatability, you will face the problem only at the word level, terminology level itself. So when you don't have it, so you are stuck there. You can't move ahead. Yeah. So let's see. We all know green. Green is there. If it is greenish, that ish word, boyish. Can you translate? In Bengali it can be. Telugu? Haritam. Okay. Green and greenish, you have that? Okay. Yeah. So we know drinking water. In Telugu we say tragu neeru, or in Kannada kudiyava neeru, right? If it is drinkable. In Sanskrit it is there. Yeah. By the way, it is not that words are available but not able to translate. That is different, and these examples are different. But savory we don't have equivalent word. And villa also. Villa, mansion, castle, bangla. Bangla is used as bangla itself in Telugu. Right? Mansion, castle, they say mahal, palace and all that. Even palace itself is again English. Yeah. Now, okay. These are the problems common to any translator. Now, if the problem is with the translator, okay, then how do you call him or her as translator? That is first question. Now, even after that, he or she is a good translator with good experience, but sometimes the laxity of translator, right, may lead to some kind of misinterpretation and wrong translations. So that's why I said we are double-edged swords. So we should be very, very careful. I can tell you one example with research. I am telling you that Amitabh Ghosh, the Shadow Lines, is translated into Telugu. Luckily, that original got Sahitya Academy Award. The translation also got the best translation award by Sahitya Academy itself, very long back. So now what happened is, when we read, as I told, the Shadow Lines, he used many Bengali or Bangla kinship terms in that original thing. But what the translator should do? He is good at English and Telugu, fine. But in English you have other language words, right? Either you are, so domesticating or foreignizing, or you are taking them as it is one concept. Or if you are giving the equivalence in Telugu, you should follow the same thing consistently. But sometimes the translator's negligence may lead to wrong translations. For example, that Mesha Moshai is uncle, maternal uncle. So that is mistranslated as co-brother. See, co-brother, now the relationship is changed. There Mesha Moshai, here it is translated as Telugu Saddakulu. Todalludu Saddakulu. In Telangana we say Saddakulu. So it is translated as Saddakulu itself, where the relationship itself is changed. For Tamma, he has very shortly used it as Bamma. Very much appreciated. Okay, Tamma, Bamma is fine. And there are some characters like Jeta Mosha is there, for example. And sweet, for example, sweet name Sandesh. Okay, and that is translated into Telugu as Sandeshalu, which means messages. So it looks very odd actually. No, because you understand the context. Sandesh as a sweet, or if you don't know the word, you can write it as some sweet, right? Some mitai or something in Telugu, but it is mistranslated or wrongly translated as messages, Sandeshalu, because Sandesh as Sandeshalu is taken. So where I don't say that the translator is incompetent, maybe some negligence, we cannot say that it is a typographical error also, right? So that is another thing. Sometimes like some brand names, okay, or walrus moustache. So this walrus moustache is thick or thin? Check. Okay, walrus. So it's the misalu we say in Telugu. That moustache itself is translated as beard. Where it gaddam, beard. So now that what is happening there? So it is not that there is no equivalent. Where is the problem? With the problem, translator. And if you get an award for that, Just think like that. No, it is not to criticize. No, this is my practical experience I am telling. I can show you the evidences also. Okay. Yeah. Now, translators visibility and invisibility. Because I was reading that Telugu novel of this, the Shadow Lines, Telugu translation. The translator was very much visible to me. So visible means every time when I read that, I used to remember the translator. What did this guy do? What did this guy do? Not from positive side, it is negative side. So when you are translating, the translator should never be visible. So translator should always be invisible. So like our governments, if the road is very smooth, so you will go with some 100 speed, you will never bother about. But if there are lots of speed breakers, potholes and all that, what do you think? So every moment you will think, right? So your speed will come down, you have to change the gear and all these things, right? So that's how the translator should also be. So the translator should be invisible as much as possible. Now you may ask how? There are two techniques. One is Lawrence Vinetti talks about domestication and foreignization. So if you are translating for the benefit of the target reader, you can adopt domestication, where you will nativize or you will give some equivalents of that particular, of what? Language and culture. For example, you can say you are translating from English to Telugu or some Indian language. There is a baseball in English. We don't play baseball here, right? So what can be the equivalent for that? So you can domesticate. You can think that if I translate, I may use it as Karrabilla. Let's say it's not equivalent, but I am domesticating. See, domesticating is completely different from giving equivalence. Okay, domestication is almost like your kind of transcreation or adaptation. So you will have that original theme and sense, but the context is completely changed. So for example, the location is London, so now you can change it to either Hyderabad or Mysore or Bangalore according to the needs, right? Character names, for example, there may be Rosie, May, this and that. So here you can say Rajesh, Mahesh, Suresh, Naresh kind of thing, right? So it's very familiar names. Okay, so because you are domesticating it. Sometimes you can foreignize also. So you may ask me, sir, you translated, I have translated so many things, 2 books for Sahitya Academy and all. So I follow 2 techniques. When I translate from English to Telugu, I mostly domesticate because I am biased towards target. Yeah, next time when I translate into English, I am foreignizing because there also I have selfish feeling that my English reader should know about this particular context. For example, I was talking about that sare. Okay, we have one more concept, there. What is that given? That sweet, chalividi. So chalividi, it is culturally rooted actually. Maybe in Karnataka also, I don't know whether it is there. Maybe in other states also, I don't know. But if someone is reading about the chalividi, so they should know what is the importance of that particular word, especially culturally rooted word. So we can use this. But if you are using more foreignization, you are visible, right? Because every time you foreignize, you give some footnotes, then you give some kind of explanation. So sometimes it is very, very difficult, right? So then we have to think what is the best way to do. So one thing is you can domesticate if you want to be invisible, because ultimately whatever we say, ultimately whatever you translate should be what? Should be readable, right? And of course, when you translate, as I told, you cannot ignore the culture. So culture is very, very important. So that's why it is beyond linguistics. So the extra linguistic feature, it's like doctor operating without, he can't ignore the skin, right? So always to do some heart surgery, you should go through the skin, right? So our culture is like that. So that's why you can see it in the next things. So these are the general methods. I don't know about the time part. Yeah, so maybe another 10-15 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay, so he is indicating. Yeah, okay. So now you may ask, what are the different methods and approaches? Because same stanza, I think many of you have attempted, but you might have followed word for word translation. Some of you followed literal translation. Some of you named it as faithful translation or semantic translation, where your focus is on source language emphasis. Whereas some people, they are very free. No, I want my target reader to understand. You have freely translated. You can call it as sense to sense for sense, or free translation, adaptation, or communicative translation. So which one to follow? Who should decide? Who should decide? The translator should decide. But same time, why do you translate? Okay, but you have a purpose, right? Purpose is important. So when your purpose is clear, your strategies will be clear. When government is asking you to do it, right, you know how to do it. Okay. And when a private publisher is asking you to do it, you know how to do it. So that's why your purpose will decide your strategies. So though you are the translator, though you can decide your strategies, but there are certain things which can influence. So that's why out of these 8 models or methods or approaches, so you can follow any of these things. But sometimes it may be a mix of many things, right? So that is also possible. So now, so yes sir, we followed this, that and all that. So can there be a perfect translation? Yes? Yes or no? It can be. Okay. Right? If it is perfect translation, there is no problem at all. Right? All our class is waste of time, right? Of course, true. But in the process of going for a perfect translation, you find all these challenges. So you have to think of equivalence, you have to think of culture, you have to think of language, you have to think of hyponyms, you have to think of word level equivalence, syntax, right? So sometimes syntactic mismatches will also impact the translations, right? So when you are translating from Indian language to English, the first thing comes is sentence structure, subject object verb and subject verb object, right? Isn't it? So that is another thing that we have to think. So now that, yeah, actually this is based on theories model where we have been talking about word level, right? Then sentence level. At one point, all the linguistic theories, especially people like Roman Jakobson, Catford, Nida, Peter Newmark, they were focusing more on the linguistic aspects where their maximum reach is word, then syntax. So now that at one point people thought that when you are translating a text level equivalence is important. It is not at the word level or sentence level. Text in a context. So when you know the function of a text, the purpose of a text and the purpose of translation, so that is known as Scopus theory. So in Scopus theory, they focus on the function. So the function, the purpose, when you know the purpose of your translation, you will know what strategies to adopt, what strategies to follow. At one point people also thought that, so it is not text level equivalence. Previously it was equivalence at word level, sentence level. Now it moved to the text level, but text cannot be in isolation, right? So text will have a context. So that is known as the system. So you have a poly system. So there are many systems in the society. You have a social system, you have cultural system, because I was talking that you cannot neglect the culture when you translate. So when you have social system, you have cultural system, you have economic system, all these systems, and same time one of the subsystems is your literary subsystem. So then part of your literary subsystem, your translation comes. So that's why from word level, sentence level to a text level, now where did you come? Yes, poly system. So there are many systems, this is one of the systems. And of course in late 80s and early 90s, people like Susan Bassnett, they talked about culture is the prime unit, the basic unit of translation. And after that the post-colonial turn came, where people talked about the colonizers' influence of on translation. Then you have gender and translation, Sherry Simon and all, they talked about it, right? And the binaries, whether translation can be treated as a secondary text or secondary activity. Do you agree with that now? Yes or no? Yes? Do you really think translation as a secondary activity? No. After that, this translation as rewriting, because every language has its own reality. So when you are translating one text from one language to other language, definitely the original is there for the original language and culture, the source, the target is there for the, so it has its own reality in that particular context and that particular culture. So that's why, so translation is regarded as a rewriting. So now after Lawrence Venuti's domestication and foreignization, if you are more focusing on the domestication process, the translator becomes invisible. So when the translator is invisible, the translated text is treated as original, right? So when the translation text is treated as original, so it has its own reality there. So then the problem is solved. Then you need not bother about word level equivalence or sentence level equivalence. So if you look at the journey of the shifts, so from word level, sentence level, the syntax level to the text in a context, then the social or poly system, then from there translation as original. So now that, so any translation has its own importance. So we can never say that this is a secondary activity or secondary entity. So that's the shift. And of course later on nowadays the trends are these, right? So now you have audio visual translation, localization, video game translation, machine translation, right? So translation and technology, AI and translation. So these are the latest areas that the works are going on. Maybe tomorrow's class anyhow we will be talking on audio visual translation. So these especially machine translation, as I told AICTE, they are using that Anuvadini tool, and Anuvadika is developed by CIL Mysore, and Bhashali is also there. So people are using the machine translations. But see, as a human being who knows, right, two cultures and two languages, there itself we are doing lot of mistakes while translating. Just imagine a machine doing it. Do you expect that, right? And when you translated that stanza, you could find that creativity part, this and that. So do you expect the same creativity or same accuracy level when a machine translates that? So that spring, common spring, the phrase, it would have translated it as it is, literal translation, right? Okay, in one of the, some things I tried with machine that, there is something in buddhi in Telugu. Okay, so that is given in a sentence. So the sentence was fine, that buddhi is translated as Buddha. Okay, so buddhi, what is buddhi? So but it is, Buddha is completely different. So if you depend on the machine, so it will be like that. So that's why we should be very careful when you deal with machine. Of course, they are not just left like that, right? The output of that machine translation is always, you have post editing and human interventions are there. So after that it will become a readable text. Especially this will work for non-literary translations where you say, the knowledge text, yeah, so all these things. But in case of literary text, definitely I feel that, so we should use some aesthetics also, because when you are translating a sonnet into some Indian language or Telugu, if not as sonnet, at least it should look like a poem, right? It should not be like some short story or novel, right? And don't write your commentaries when you are translating, right? Because our hands are already fettered, right? And if you are failing as a translator, so there is an award. What is that award? Traditor. Translator as traitor. So now we have to decide. So whether you want to be a what? You want that award or what? We don't want that award, right? So let's be a good translators. Let's attempt to be good translators, right? So that's what is for today.